I'm just gonna start recording and hope for the best. All right, it's officially recording. Hopefully, this records well because it's acting a little funny. But anyway, my name is Mia, and this is the jump start of interviewing cool and interesting people, especially in the creative industry, talking to them about what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and just random topics as well. It's intended to be fun, informative, or whatever comes out of the conversation. So, with us today, we have photographer, professor, multi hyphenate music person, Diane Wah. So, I'm going to go ahead and bring her in so we can talk
Hello.
about all of the cool things.
Is
What's
it a
up?
little too dark? I think I can add a little more light. Wait,
Yeah.
give me 1 second.
See, normally I don't have a ring light, but my sister is here and she let me borrow one, so I'm extra bright. But my original video was like extra fuzzy. So,
Yeah, actually, I realized I had the way the timing worked out. My ring light is actually at my studio, and I was on my way to my studio, and I was just like, you know what? Let me get this done at home, and then I'm gonna go to the studio afterwards. But I left it at the studio. Um,
sure.
so, how are you doing today?
I am doing okay. I've had my first lazy day in a very long time. It's got me in some sort of
Congratulations.
like time warp. So this forced me to take a shower and put some clothes on. And I will be doing things with my evening, but I can't say I did much this whole entire day.
Me neither. Me neither. I actually started swimming, and I think this is the issue with like hustle culture in general. Um, I forgot that today was me and my husband's date anniversary.
Oh wow.
Well, he doesn't think it's a thing, but I like prefer it to our actual anniversary. It just got fond memories for me. But we argue every year about what day it is. It was on Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving falls on a different day
Right.
every year. So we're trying to figure out if we go by the date or if it's by Thanksgiving. But yeah, I brought him a plate on Thanksgiving, and now he makes the mac and cheese. So that's how that ended.
You got to just go by Thanksgiving instead of the actual date.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, especially because like it's guaranteed that you're probably going to be off or I don't know, sales, I don't know. Versus like if it falls on a random Monday.
Yeah, for me, I feel like every year it's an existential question. Because I'm like, I don't even fuck with Thanksgiving like that.
Right. Right. Listen, I'm like that talking about existential, like because this is my first time having like a regular schedule and a semi-realist job in almost 10 years, it just puts the emphasis on doing something during this time because I haven't had any like real off time. You know what I mean? Like before and just doing like the random artist entrepreneur life, if I wanted to take a random trip on a random Tuesday, I could just take a trip on a random Tuesday. And
Yeah.
technically I could and take off, but like no. So in my mind, I said I would be traveling and visiting family and stuff. But in reality, I did not get out of the bed until noon because I have not been able to do that in so long.
Well, that is good. That is a very revolutionary act for Black women in this day and age. Don't do shit. Like we
And
spend
I
a
have to
lot of
remind
time.
myself that, especially when I'm getting a headache from watching way too many like TikToks and reels. That's when it's like maybe I should have got up.
No, the dead scrolling that's got me. It's a pandemic in and of itself. Yeah. I
Anywho, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, like what you do? I know that you work with so many different people, especially as a photographer. You're in New York. What are some other things that you would like to share in that regard?
so yeah, so I think like especially like at dinner parties, and I just have to like quickly introduce myself, I'll say that I'm a photographer. Really, I consider myself, and I'm saying this in like trying to say it in the least pretentious way possible, but like I consider myself a conceptual artist
Mhm.
whose primary craft is photography, but my goals are to hack into the collective subconscious and start shit. Um, and and I mean, not a lot of people use this word, but I do consider myself like a polymath insofar as I do work in a variety of disciplines. Um, um, with a certain level of experience and technical expertise. And a lot of those different things kind of mix together. I know that some things that's a label that a lot of artists shy away from because there's that whole adage of like, jack of all trades, master of none. But in especially my most recent artistic endeavors, it has me wearing a lot of hats in order to do what I do. And so, like, it's not even just like, pretension or anything. It's just like an accurate description of what I do. So, most recently, I started an indie record label with my husband called The Binge Click. Um, and The Binge Click is, as I would describe it, like when we were conceptualizing it, was um, partially old school Motown artist development with like Andy Warhol's Factory. I like to describe it as like the next iteration of Wu Tang.
Mhm.
If Wu Tang let in girls or like visual artists.
Right.
So it has a lot of the parts of an artistic collective, except one, we have a hierarchy, we got deadlines, we meet them. Because I hate the word artist collective because it's usually a bunch of people just hanging out, smoking weed, and not doing shit.
Right.
But we have very all of us have had like some sort of like corporate background or whatnot, so we're a collective that is very intentional in the kinds of work we want to do and the kind of impact that we want to have in the world. But part of doing that, I work as creative director at Binge. So I pretty much kind of philosophically guide the artists because it's a lot of the same artists as far as like as far as like themes and vibes and aesthetics, but they're all working in different mediums. So we have our rappers, we have fashion designers. I do like a lot of the photographic work. We have conceptual artists, and everyone kind of influences everybody else. But as far as kind of like driving the ship and figuring out who we are creatively, that's pretty much what I do.
Mhm.
So I don't just work with the visual artists. I also work with the musicians, and also I teach, and that's always been a huge part of my practice because working with the kids does it's a good outlet for me creatively. So that is part of like the whole soup that is Diane as far as what I do. I don't know.
And you teach college, right?
Yes, I teach college, which you have to specify when you're a Black woman.
Yes.
I used to try to be coy with it when I first started teaching. I'd be like, "Oh, I teach." Now I'm like, "It's Professor Wah," and
Yeah.
because as soon as I would say, "Oh, I teach," the next question is, "What grade?"
Right. Exactly.
And no
Yeah.
shade, and listen, no shade through the K through 12 teachers. I used to teach K through 12, but the imagination of usually the person asking the question is so limited that the concept of me teaching college and also not teaching African American studies or anything related to. They're like, "What do you teach?" I'm like, "I teach computers, I teach photography." And they're like,
It blows their mind. No. Yeah.
"You know how many
All the
times
things.
somebody's asked me, 'Oh, you went to Columbia College, the country?'"
The little mini, what they call microaggressions.
I
Man, I wish I remember what I was watching the other day where it was oh, you know what? It was that video of like I don't know what show that is. Maybe it's one of those. competition shows, but it was in UK, and it was the black woman that was singing, and Kelly Rowland was on there, and
Oh, you froze. Oh, you froze. Hello, hello, hello.
okay,
Okay.
yeah, it like went out
All right.
weirdly just now. But yeah, it was like this not award show,
Is it
the
like The Voice?
competition show, and it was a black woman singing. It was based in UK, and it was trying to break down like what racism in the UK looks like. And they were saying these little microaggressions, like, you're great, you're such a good singer, but you're so confident, you're too confident, or the stuff that was happening behind the scenes, like you're a little bit too mean. And basically, it's like I'm intimidated by you, but instead of saying that and checking my own self, is like projecting my insecurities and my intimidation onto this young black woman. And Kelly Rowland like checked them and basically was just like, "What are y'all even talking about? Like, she's a singer. You need to be confident on stage." And all
That's
of those
the
things.
whole job. That's the whole
Yes.
thing.
So I mean, um, that kind of makes me think about uh just like it seems like all of these black artists are trying to navigate what it looks like to be and what it means to be a black artist in this space, where we're kind of moving away from, just kind of being the face of something or being exploited and operating our power, but also wanting access to the resources and the spaces of these oppressive communities. And I think we talked about it before with even the record label. Like, part of the reason why y'all put that together was kind of having a different way forward and a different way of thinking about like music, art, and business. Can you kind of speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So when Annie and I first got the idea for starting Binge Click, we had gotten a space in New York that we'd spent 2 years doing construction on. It's a two-story space, and if anyone knows anything about New York real estate, it's insanely expensive here. And one of the things I used to say was that New York is a great place to show art because there's so many people here and such a diverse crowd of people here. And if anytime you perform anywhere, like you can have a lot of really great impact. But because it's so expensive to live here, it's a really shitty place to make art. So I had spent a lot of time. I was born and raised in New York, and I spent a lot of time actually living in Toledo, Ohio, because that's where my husband's from. And I'll tell you, being an artist out there it was mind blowing. Um, it was one of the first times that, as an artist, I felt like I could take risks because honestly, the cost of living was cheaper. My whole relationship with my art form changed because in New York, because everything's so expensive, artists don't really take a lot of risks here because it costs too much money. You can't just do shit to do shit here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like in a place like Ohio, well, one, when I first got there, nobody knew who I was, which was great. And then also, you can just kind of be in the middle of nowhere. There's a reason Dave Chappelle lives in Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Right.
I basically pulled a Dave Chappelle before Dave Chappelle.
Listen.
Um, and it was really lit for a while because like I said, like the expanse of my work and the scale of my work got a lot bigger. I wasn't making much money. I was teaching at a community college at the time. I wasn't making much money, but it was cool because like my husband was making money gigging. They really appreciate live music. So I thought that was really cool from a creative standpoint. But still, after 3 years, it's still Ohio. It's a
Mm-hmm.
battleground state. So there's a lot of racism. There's a lot of cool people, but there's a lot of fucked up people there too. And I miss New York. So when we came back to New York, I was just like, I really wish I could kind of mix both of those worlds. So we created this production studio in Bushwick that kind of mirrored a little bit of what we had in a place like Toledo. And, it's a two-story space. Downstairs, we do music. Upstairs, we do like photography and visuals, and there's like a performance space. But essentially, the idea was this. We wanted to have like a one-stop shop for mid-level musicians, not the Justin Biebers of the world, not somebody who's just like, stunting on the gram, pretending to be a rapper. Because I noticed a certain trend on my feed, like from like social media. There was, because I was friends. I mean, you know, we went to school together. Like, you know, the friends that are in our circle. So I noticed that there was like two types of artists. There was like the artists that have really great marketing and they look like the shit's fire. But when you actually go to the show, the shit is not fire.
Right.
Bananas. But then there were all these amazing artists that I knew that had amazing music, and my hard drive, my iPod, whatever, was full of all this music from people that I knew that were independent artists. But one of the things I noticed is that as soon as they're done writing the songs, recording it, producing it, doing everything, they don't have anything left for the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was consistent, very consistent. And I was just like, I'm gonna try to help them. So I thought I'd help them by making a production studio. And one of the clients that we used to get would be people who were like either positioned to get a deal or about to get a deal. And one of the things you might know about the music business itself is it's just a giant scam. But in the past 20 years, it's gotten even worse. So say you take a kid, you know, from the hood and tell them, oh, I want to sign you. Signing someone means certain things. So they might give you a bonus. Say they give you $100,000, right? You tell a kid from the projects that I'm giving you a check for $100,000. They're like, boom, I'm rich. Except
right.
They're not in the fine print. That is a $100,000 high interest loan where all of the production from your album comes out of your end at sometimes a 200 to 600% markup. So, and so you're basically borrowing money from the record company at a high interest rate. And then if you actually make any money, they're going to take that cut out before you ever get paid, which is a very exploitative model. And at the time when we first started the studio, a lot of our friends had started getting signed to major label contracts. And we're watching our friends like just be super excited and we're really happy for them. And we had kind of decided to go another route. And we would get some musicians that would kind of give us money to do like the whole package, like the beats, everything or whatever. But a couple years into it, and two things were happening. One, we're making some really whack rich kids look cool. I didn't want to be a part of it because people ask me what I do, and I'm like, I make niggas look cool, and I'm really good at it. I'm not cool, but I make niggas look cool. And when I make the wrong niggas look cool, it doesn't sit with me. So there was a point that no matter how much money you gave me, I just couldn't fucking do it anymore. And then the second thing that was happening was watching people that I care about get famous and devolve into some really dark, lonely places, having serious issues with mental health, just being generally unsafe because of the nature of their record contracts. Because one of the things I also started seeing with the music industry is how they systematically try to separate you from your support system, how they target very specific types of personality types, people with certain mental illnesses, how they encourage a certain toxicity so that they can keep control over you. So one day, you know, we had the means of production. So one day my husband looked at me, he was just like, "You want to start a label?" And I just looked at him like, "Do we know about starting?" Sure, whatever. Like, I don't know. I was definitely in one of my demon periods. I was trying to make some bitch mad, and I was like, "Fuck it."
That's like the motivation for every Leo woman. If you want to accomplish something.
This one was not one of them. My husband said it. Because my husband, I feel like we're both very like visionary thinkers, but like there are times when he says some shit, and I'm just like, most of the times I see what he sees, but sometimes I don't. But I'm lucky I'm with the person where I can just be like, fuck it, and it's probably gonna work out. And I'm also excited by that kind of artistry. I like artists that surprise me. So I was like, fuck it. And he was just like, listen, now that the record industry is changing, a record label can be whatever you want it to be. So I was coming at it from a visual standpoint. And one of the things I started noticing was some of the toxicity in the art world too. Things that I saw that musicians had figured out that visual artists hadn't. And one of the big ones was collaboration. Um,
Mm.
One of the things I noticed that was in common with like my visual artist friends, myself included, was that I noticed we never worked together. Some of us were friends with each other, but there was no collaboration happening. Like I'm a
Mm.
photographer and I hang around a bunch of musicians. I don't hang out around a bunch of other photographers. And I thought it was just like my art form that did that, but I noticed that with painters, fashion designers, same thing. And I started kind of interrogating why, because like some of the musicians that I work with, um when they work with me, they don't want to work with other people. And I was kind of trying to like interrogate why that was. And a lot of it had to be with the fact that with a lot of especially artists that are like known to be difficult to work with, which is something that I kind of specialize in. I was there for the entire creative process. So you basically have like a group of people that spend their entire lives, honing in this particular skill, which is, for example, making music. Now we're living in an increasingly a visual world. Now it's like, how can you take something as personal as your image and put that in the hands of somebody who doesn't know you or doesn't get you?
Mm.
And
Right.
especially if you're doing some new shit, you know what I mean, that hasn't been done before, like that's a really tough place to be in. So I'd be there for like the whole process. And so by the time it came time for pictures, one of the things that I helped with was not just taking pictures, but helping musicians and especially people who are not used to being in front of the camera, meaning writers, people like the behind the scenes people that are just as important. I helped them kind of figure out who they were visually too. So that's a little bit about like what I do at Binge. But yeah, for most of my career, I did mostly fine art. I did conceptual work. I did a lot of gallery stuff. And I was doing pretty well in the art world for a while, but you've known me for years. At some point, I'm gonna say "fuck you" to whatever the fuck I'm doing. So, yeah, I think I answered your question. I know that was a little long winded. I smoked.
I know. I don't even remember what my question is, but it's all good. The questions are just supposed to prompt conversation, right? As long as it's
Oh
interesting
yeah, you were
conversation,
asking
that's
what I
all that
was
matters.
doing with like my studio or something. Anyway.
Is that what you said? I don't know. Okay. Um, so another thing that I'm curious about, because it's just like a really weird time to be an artist, and you said that like as a visual artist or even as a somebody that's helping to consult and conceptualize, like a lot of your motivation is to start stuff and start conversation.
Mhm.
So it's like on one hand, there's a pressure to be vocal and bold about what your beliefs are. And on the other hand, there's this pressure to be quiet because if you say too much or if you say the wrong thing, then it's like shut down immediately. So it's like, how have you, like, what do you think about that? And how have you approached that?
Well, that is a problem that's been near and dear to me. Because like I remember even since college, like I think in college I started off as a writer. I got into photography, but it was in college especially, I was still kind of trying to figure out what kind of artist I was gonna be. Like I knew that I was an artist, but I hadn't figured out what my medium was necessarily gonna be. And I remember like my brand was always that I didn't give a fuck, which is a really easy brand to maintain when you're 19, 20, you got no bills, responsibilities, but now I'm getting older. I have a stepson. I have a family. I got bills. I got shit to lose.
Hmm.
So maintaining that was really difficult. And I was lucky that I kind of figured out some important things about myself as an artist and about art making early on. And one of the first things was that money and art don't mix. Everybody's dream, and myself included, was to make money doing my art. When I graduated Columbia, I went from having never had a show, never having had my work up on a gallery, to getting these dope ass residencies, getting shows left and right, selling my work for thousands of dollars to important people. I went from 0 to 60 real quick, and and it didn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. Um, and one of the things that surprised me was, one, my own relationship to my art. As I got better as an artist, I was a lot more protective of my work. And the thing about being a visual artist is that, like, you're making like actual objects, and having that thing be in a creepy old dude's house who creeps you the fuck out feel a certain type of way, and it affected me more than I was expecting it to. So then it was another one of those situations where, like, my price was getting higher and higher, and there was a point where it's just like, it don't matter how much you pay me, I don't want you to have this. Um, so that was like the first thing. And two, the other thing, the only thing that's scarier than failure is success. Because like out the gate for my thesis show, I had been known for doing this series of conceptual album covers. So there's one of them behind me. So I had done a series of, like, I'd started a fake record label, and I'd made album covers for artists that didn't exist. So I was doing all these, like, I made one for Barack Obama, I did one for like Hillary Clinton, I did a whole bunch of stuff. So they were selling like hotcakes, and I was like, boom, I'm gonna get some money, I'm gonna get rich, blah blah blah. But as soon as, like, I would have an idea for something, there was someone in the art world to, like, either blow smoke up my ass or have an opinion about it or whatever. Like, I felt like I was in like a fishbowl, and it was really suffocating creatively. And there's this fear that, okay, well, whatever my idea was, this is the last good idea I'll ever have. So I did that for a while, but I was really anxious. But that's also when I started teaching on the college level. And one of the things I noticed was that I felt like all the work that sold the most or had the most success was work that I made when I really didn't care about the money. I just needed to make it. And it was this really weird kind of like Mobius strip where it's just like, how do you keep maintaining that? Like,
Yeah.
and I realized that, okay, I've got to separate that. I felt a lot better when I was teaching a couple times a week, when I was making money doing something else and not worrying about this artwork to pay my rent. I felt more centered because then I could just make shit to make shit. But that being said, I do dope shit, so it'll eventually sell. But I need to not be in that place.
Yeah.
But it was a point of privilege for me too, because, like, I was in a very unique position as a visual artist where, like, I never had to worry about getting a show. I never had a problem being, you know what I mean? I was not, I was lucky that early on in my career, people were into my work and dug what I did. So I could come at it from that position where I didn't feel like I was losing opportunities. Um, so I could, like, walk away from it without worrying about it. Although I had panicky moments, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, but but I figured that out early, and then when fast forward like 10 years later or so, I was looking at some of my work, and I was actually getting a lot of shit from some of my friends and colleagues because I had even stopped showing in galleries, and they had been convinced that because I wasn't showing in galleries, I wasn't making work. And I was. I just wasn't showing y'all it. I just wasn't putting my work on the wall. So that was kind of the seed of how we wanted to use binge click as a different kind of business model. Because I started noticing that with my husband as well. He's a musician, he's a producer, that we were making some of the best work of our lives when we weren't thinking about the clout, when we weren't thinking about the social media. And I started also seeing a comparison between my relationship with my art and my friends who had so-called traditional success. You know, they're all on bordering on suicidal, really alone, having crises, but also more importantly, being forced by larger entities to making whack versions of their own shit and being forced to sing bad karaoke to it. And personally, that sounds like hell.
Yeah.
I know how I am about my art, but being contractually obligated to make a whack version of my shit, honestly, like, you know,
Right. Then you got to still put your name to it or not,
why not?
and it's just
Or
a
you're
weird
famous,
position to
but
be
you're
in.
too broke to actually get a real job. Or
Yeah.
too famous to get a real job, but too broke to pay your bills.
Right.
So you're
Yeah.
surfing on the.
I've definitely seen so much of that. And I guess I've been almost on a similar trajectory where again for like 10 years I did not have like a regular job or a regular schedule, and I was definitely like, make money doing what you love, but then a lot of times they'll end up taking the love out of what you do and you end up reducing it to a transactional thing, or you know um that that thing of having to stunt, like if people see you in a certain way, then you find yourself putting money to make sure you maintain that image or you maintain this thing, or you don't humble yourself sometimes to do what you need to do, because artistry, being an artist, being an entrepreneur can be very feast and famine for the average artist. And I don't care what level you are, it's a check by check business. And that's what people don't understand when they look at people who are deemed more successful and they see them complaining about like, oh, they're not making, like when Tidal was launched and everybody was saying like, why are these rich people complaining about like streaming prices? Not understanding how the industry works and how like music doesn't
Like,
make a
you
lot of
can't be
money.
at a certain level of fame and not have security.
Right.
Like, I'm not famous and I have security issues.
Right.
Like, like
Right.
you know, like people don't really understand the cognitive dissonance between money and fame,
Yeah.
and all the dangers that fame costs them, but also like just the true cost of things from an emotional and spiritual and physical level too. People don't get that. Like I get so triggered every time people complain about Lauryn Hill being late. I'm
Yeah.
like, do you have any idea how much it took to survive the gaslighting piece of shit that Wyclef is? I'm Haitian. I know Haitian men. Do not get this. I will
And
say,
then just couple that with everybody. Us as fans, we're gaslighting the industry itself, just like all of that. And we don't think about these people as human beings. And it's really
no.
unfortunate. And like I said, it's kind of on every level that you exist in. And so it's like it really is important for you to take a step back and also be able to say, like, what am I doing for myself? What is actually beneficial to my life? And I remember looking at that because there was a couple people that I knew, they had like, it's still a lot of people that I know that have like a lot of followers on social media. And I know people in real life. So I know that they were dealing with homelessness or dealing with like, not being able to pay their bills and all of that. And I was just like, you know what? If I have to choose between fame and security, I'm choosing security.
Well,
I'm
I
gonna do what
think
I need to do. And you can do that as an artist, and people will think that like
you froze. You froze. And
just because you're not.
when you froze,
Okay. Am I back?
yeah, you're back.
Okay. But yeah, just that is far from the truth of you don't have to be famous to be a successful artist, and you can also be an unsuccessful famous artist, especially in today's social media age. And
Yeah.
both of us, like I am teaching grade school, you're teaching college, and I don't know if you're still seeing this at the college level, but it's very obvious that a lot of these young people think that all it'll take is a viral video or a viral post in
Yo,
order to like
I just,
translate.
you know how many times a week I have to tell my students TikTok is not a real place?
I can
Well,
only imagine. I'm
I was,
scared.
well, and I had to. I mean, I haven't done it yet, but it was probably going to happen before the semester is over. But I had to check some chick because one of my students came up to me and they were like dead ass afraid, like this was a real thing, like to be afraid of. They're like, well, I'd be careful. She has like 80,000 TikTok followers. I'm like, bitch, I got Black Twitter. All right, and my ancestors, and that is realer than the 70,000 TikTok followers that bitch clearly bought.
Right.
You can tell the difference. And like these kids, this is the least creative generation I've ever met. Like our generation was out there like doing drugs, partying, breaking laws. These kids are just like, I want an A, tell me what to do. Like they are all trying to be different in the exact same way. They have no cultural memory, which is why like 3/4 of their songs are samples from like 10 years ago or reboots, and they don't even know. And I'm just like, you're so easily manipulated. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm scared. I'm legit scared. Like I'm just like, y'all not.
Well, I feel like honestly, I'm not scared because I feel like with today's kids, they fall into two categories. Um, because I'll be the first to say, our generation, we're shitty parents. Like my friends are some shitty parents, but like we're not shitty parents the same way our parents were shitty parents.
Hmm.
Our parents are shitty parents because they were kind of just like shitty people, I think sometimes. But our generation works too much and works too many hours.
Yeah.
Um, so there's this level of wokeness that this generation has, but if it's not, if it doesn't coincide with actual parental time, then I see them missing the mark in very specific ways. But the kids that do have it together, I feel like, sometimes I see some kids and like the kids are all right. Like my stepson, he's very like, like he comes from a musician family. So there's a certain work ethic and just like humility to him that makes me not worried about the future generations. But then there's like this other half of kids where the entitlement is just like, and the disconnect too. I had a young black kid tell me that she was insulted by the idea of mentorship.
Insulted by what?
She, I was talking. She was insulted by the idea of mentorship. That she wants to learn how to do things on her own. This little girl, I'm saying a little girl, she just had a baby and she had a store in my studio. I'm not going to name names, but like, um, yeah, she was telling me how like insulted she was by mentorship. I'm like, I'm the first black woman to graduate from my program at Columbia. You know what I would give to have a mentor, a photographer, a black female photographer that I could like look up to. I had other black female artists that mentored me, but like my head exploded.
I mean, I'm definitely seeing that too. And that was present with our generation, like not taking heed to like, elders and mentorships, or one thing, or I'll find in our generation, people thinking that they're the first person to do something when they're not, and then
Yeah, but
feeling
I
like they
feel
don't,
like
there's
our
nobody out there.
generation, I feel like our generation though had, at least the musicians that I hung out with, I felt like they were educated about the past. Like the music we even listened to and the music we referenced were like at least 20 years before we were all born. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
that's legit.
Like when like the entire 90s hip hop scene was about 70s samples. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like our generation is especially impactful and important because I feel like we're younger than the previous generations, meaning we've definitely had like a failure to launch type of situation, but we still have enough sense of history to kind of make connections that other generations can't. Because I feel like
Yeah, that's legit.
like
I,
no cultural memory.
yeah, I think because everything is so individualized. Like growing up, you had to listen to your parents or family's music, the stuff they like. You were watching the same stuff they were watching.
Mhm.
That's all with my kids. When I realized like the only music they knew was their little bit of stuff or like what they saw on YouTube, I've been intentional about us watching movies that I liked as a kid together, even though those movies were not for kids, even though they were for kids. So my kids be judging me.
Yo,
But it opens up
my
even.
mom had me watching straight up horror movies like
No, my
Freddy
aunt.
Krueger, Halloween. I was 6 years old.
Yeah, no, my aunt was all about that. Like, but my parents weren't. So we would have like when we were over my aunt's house, we would have to go to the other room. But even just think about the stuff we watch, like how many times we watch Color Purple or What's Love Got to Do with It at, like you said, 5, 6 years old. And my kids are judging
If
me
it
from
was
letting
black,
them
it was
watch
okay.
Who
Like
Framed Roger Rabbit and Grease. Like I was just like, y'all still have not even
We were not
seen
sheltered
the
at all.
stuff.
Most of us were latchkey kids coming home by
Right.
ourselves at 12, making meals. Like these kids, these new kids are overscheduled, over coddled, you know, not just I don't like to say over coddled because I don't want to sound like a baby boomer, but like I can look to, especially as an educator, specific cultural milestones that these kids don't have. And I think a major one of them is the slashing of arts education, because I've
Mm,
definitely see that shown up in my class a lot, because we have this capitalistic idea that if you're not making money at music or art, you don't deserve to get that education, where these kids like don't have the nonverbals that come with being in a bad band, or being able to listen intuitively with each other, or being able to think creatively, across like disciplines. Like when my husband has like an idea for like any improvements to the studio or whatnot, he can describe it to me and I can visualize it, because I
mm-hmm.
read books with no pictures,
Right, right, right.
things like that, where like even if you're not a good musician, just being in band, just being in choir gives you some very fundamental communication skills that these kids don't have. And also
Right.
cultural knowledge, cultural literacy. So, like,
That's legit. I was just talking about that because, somebody was saying the uselessness of some of the stuff you learn in school. And as I'm teaching, I'm like, part of it is just a process. And that process is something that you utilize later. Like, even if you don't use the content still, like you said, the idea, the practice of even sitting down and having to look in a book for information. So one day I made them do that, like, this is where the glossary is, this is where the index is. Of
mhm.
course you have in your phone that you can just quickly Google something, but it's important for you to know, again, the process of how do I actually take the time to figure stuff out, critical thinking, problem solving skills, because these things just feel like they are shot. And it's like, on one hand, it's like, you have every bit of knowledge in your hand, but the process of getting there, and therefore being able to differentiate what's real and what's fake, what's been vetted and what's not. You know what I mean? What's just surface level, what's deeper, what's backed by actual experience, all of these things feels like it's kind of gone out the window. I think especially with like the shutdown and with COVID and like people being isolated and being able to create their own kind of little worlds. And, I kind of
I mean,
overlooked because I already was kind of isolated myself and my kids are very young. So they weren't in school anyway. So now working with these older kids who like their middle school was taken away, or in your case, part of their high school experience was taken away. I'm really seeing the impact. Not that I think that school is even necessary. Like I think we should do away
I
from,
mean, school
but
isn't necessary, but like I agree. I encourage my students to drop out all the time, but but then I think of some of the privileges I had, where even though I didn't grow up with money or anything, I grew up with parents who were very present in our education. So things like going to public school didn't bother me. Like I had a lot of learning, as far as like I had parents that knew it was important to impart certain values and beliefs in me. I remember my dad sitting me down like before ninth grade and being like, listen, you need to get good grades because that's how you get into college and get the shit you need to. But everything they're telling you is lies and it's racist. And he was just like, I remember him sitting me down to read Chomsky and Howard Zinn at like 12 and like Marx and shit like that. I remember like my parents being very present in a way that I think today's parents can't be. They're overworked, they're exhausted, they have their phones. So even when they do come home, they check out. But I'm not even saying this on some like pound cake speech, like blame the parents, but that's just the nature of a society that's built for a single income, where there's a mom at home and the schools, start at 8 and end at 3, and you have two income households where parents don't get home till 7.
hmm
Make it make sense.
right.
Which is why we've had such a decline in people having kids these days, because it's just like having children is just seems like something idiots and rich people do. Like, just like you just said, oh fuck it, caution to the wind, I'm gonna do this. But when you actually do the math, like it's hard to be like, this is a good idea. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. In this culture and society for
in this
sure.
culture and society, it's just like if and shout out to the people who are just doing it anyway, because like that would be the end of humanity. But yeah, it's kind of hard to like just be like, you know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go have a baby in a place where there's no health care or sport,
No maternity leave,
no maternity
no
leave, no.
child care, no nothing. You just
Yeah,
uh
you just raw dogging life, just like actually.
listen.
And COVID was real. I felt really bad. Like honestly, like I was gonna. My husband and I we were thinking about like having kids, but COVID did it for me. I was just like, I'm good. I'm fully committed to this auntie life. You send me your kids for the weekend, I'll send them right back. But yeah, parents were struggling during COVID. So yeah.
Yeah, that was funny to me because again, I'd already been in the house with my kids,
Yeah,
and
but see,
so it
you,
opened
you
my eyes. I
like
was
your
like,
children.
"Oh, so I'm not completely losing my mind. I just been stuck in the house with kids." And then that's when I started sending them elsewhere. Like COVID is when I started being like, maybe I need some boundaries and a
Some
break
boundaries.
because I'm
You
seeing that
know, too.
everybody else going through what I've been going through for the past 7 years, or however long it was.
But you always seem like somebody one who likes being a parent and like likes their kids. Whereas I know a lot of people who really had no business having kids don't even like kids. And like I'm just like kids are, and I unfortunately I've had to have this conversation with too many people where I'm like kids are not handbags. Like
Yeah,
so and because I've seen this as a teacher too, where you have certain people, especially I think people chasing that kind of suburban lifestyle, and kids are like this logical next step.
right, right, right.
So they kind of outsource the raising of the kids to like their teachers and other caregivers, and suddenly they're not available. And now you're stuck in the house or your little hell children. Like,
Right. Yeah, and nobody is used to being together. But
yeah,
I can also see again now that I've we're all on a more normal schedule. My kids are in school now. I'm in a job. Like just again the way that this culture and society is set up, it just makes children even more annoying. Because like the little stuff that they do, just exploring life. You know what I mean? Like even just like being slow to get out of bed. When you have somewhere to be, it's just like wow, and it just makes it even harder. Just like
nothing triggers me more than horror movies with kids that don't recognize danger. Like, this is like I think it was like World War Z. There's like all these zombies that are coming. Like shit has just completely hit the fan. And this little girl's like, I need my bunny, and I'm like, bruh.
listen. After I watched, what was that movie, Bird Box? Like, first of all, that movie was dumb. I felt like it was written by a bot, but I was just like, my kids would not survive this.
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of anxiety. And I tell, like, sometimes I do just go off on them sometimes. Like, if we were having an emergency, if there was a burglar or something, and I told y'all to come on or be quiet or something.
But why? But why?
I
I
was
used
like,
to have
you
that
wouldn't
nightmare
make it. You wouldn't make it. Which is why I've also been showing them stuff from when I was a kid because I feel like the stuff from our generation had a healthy level of trauma, like Home
Yeah, just
Alone.
a
You
little
know what
bit.
I mean?
A little trauma.
My girl,
These kids don't
just
have
a
enough.
little bit.
Like I feel like they have misplaced trauma. They got like too much trauma in one direction and like not enough in another direction.
Yeah, like where it matters.
Where
Like
I've
I'll
seen
tell them
parents
that.
that, like on Facebook, they'd be like, I don't like to use the word no with my kid. And I'm like, so you're raising a future serial killer.
They can't take no.
I was just like, bro, like I come from the don't let them die school of parenting. Like I get my parenting tips from like The Walking Dead, because like I was watching like they had their final episode the other night, and I know that show stopped being good seasons ago, but like this kid, by the time he was 12, he had already been shot twice. His mom delivered his baby sister. I'm like, you know who nobody sees any shit from? Fucking Carl on The Walking Dead. That kid is a G. Dad takes him everywhere. I was just like, you have just enough trauma to teach your kids things, but you don't let them die, you know? And like, being able to pick yourself back up is probably the most important lesson to teach a kid. But I don't think it's a right to like abuse your kids. But all my friends that had like what I thought were perfect childhoods are in rehab right now. So or just got out of rehab or on their way to rehab, but
it's some sort of cycle. Yeah, I mean, and there's studies to prove this, and that's where that coddling thing come in. Like, we have to have space to figure things out on our own. I believe that children are supposed to live outside. That's just period. They're not supposed to be allowed in the house. They're supposed to come in to sleep, maybe help with some chores. They're supposed to be outside all day.
Drunk idiots, just
and we're not letting them do that. Like, even in New York, it was a whole situation, a story when somebody let their kid catch the train by themselves, which is a really New York experience, and people were going off, and it's just like they
if
they
you
can
ever
do that.
get lost on the train at 12 years old, I used to get lost on the train before there were cell phones.
Exactly.
In the middle of Coney Island. Well, guess what? I learned uptown and downtown that day.
You learned uptown, downtown. You learn how to figure stuff out. You learn how to work under pressure. That's what I would get lost on the bus system down here. I remember I started catching a bus when I was 12, and I remember getting made fun of for being old just catching the bus, because my cousins were catching a bus by themselves at like 7, 8 years old. But now, if your kids are just like, one time, we should wrap up because it's almost been an hour. But one time I let my daughter asked if she could get out the car and walk home the rest of the way. We were only a block down from our house. And I let them do it. And I was riding alongside of them. And this woman kept like riding alongside of us. And I'm just like, why is she doing that? And then finally she was like, she went over, she was like, do you know these kids? And I'm like, yeah, they're my kids. And then she was like, oh, I was just making sure they were okay because they were outside. I'm like, I'm walking down the street. That's what we did all the time. Like, whoever I was talking to had to have grown up where she was walking down the street, as a kid. Like, and I'm literally right there yelling at my kids from the car because I'm just like, yes, let's stick together. I'm like giving them latchkey training because I'm just like, nah, I'm not letting y'all go out the way the slightly olders are going out. I just can't do it. You're going to have to use your brain. You're going to have to figure stuff out. You're going to have to like know how to navigate.
Well, actually, honestly, like, so as you know, I'm a stepmom, and I came into my stepson's life. Like, he was relatively young, like 1, 2 years old. And our family and his other family are very different, like, politically, religiously, or whatever. But on certain parenting things, we're like on the same page, which I'm very grateful for. But I remember my first instinct, and this is like, I think every parent's instinct, was to just give them everything that I never had growing up. And that is a really great instinct to have, and it's natural and so on and so forth. But I think we had a really, really, really contentious custody battle. So he grew up really quickly, going back and forth and so forth. And I remember feeling really guilty because everything we're told about how to be parents as adults, and all of our instincts say, give your kid what you didn't have, fill in those blanks, protect them from everything. But there was a lot of grown-up situations that we just couldn't protect them from. And then on top of that, we didn't do the whole babysitter thing because my husband's family, he's a musician, his parents are musicians, comes from like a whole family of musicians. So especially with like one kid, he was like mad portable. So I remember we used to just take him everywhere with us. So so many nights it'd be like 10 o'clock. We're in the back of a bar coloring, while the rest of the family's like on stage and shit like that. And I remember like just feeling kind of guilty because we couldn't give him the same toys as the other kids. We couldn't give him all the things that the parenting magazines and society told us to give him. And lo and behold, ironically, like right now, I don't worry about him. And like I was kind of like surprised about that because like I care about him, but I realized I don't worry about him because like while it was hard to not give him all those things, not having those things made him a much more capable kid to the point where it's just like I trust his ability to handle things. And then also, if he can't handle things, he's got my number. He knows where to find me. He has a support system. And but it was really hard not to just like do those things because I feel like society tells you a lot about, but at the end of the day, that's your kid. Like you're the one there.
Right.
So
Right. And
yeah.
it's definitely understanding that balance. So again, in the sake of wrapping up, just can we just leave on either advice for visual or music artists entering the industry, or any just final thoughts, how we can support you, what can we support, whatever you want to wrap it up on.
Two things as far as advice to artists. There's a major difference between what you want and what society tells you what you want. Always make sure to sit down with yourself and figure out what the fuck you want in life. And that's true in music, art, just regular shit. Because a lot of us just are operating on autopilot and don't think about the things that we do and why we do them. And as far as how you can support, we are just launching the album. We're going to be releasing new music soon. So you can follow us on Instagram at Binge Click with a Q. BINGECLIQUE at Binge Click on Instagram. And that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you for taking the time to do this and talking to me and giving us all of the good information. Spilling all the
I will spill all the tea everywhere.
Yes. It's really hard to have candid conversations in this industry. And so it's important when someone is willing to do it.
Well, actually, that's probably, and I don't know if this is a piece of advice or just information, but one of the things I realized early on in my career that was like really important to me was my independence. And the way that I could maintain the don't give a fuck brand is by owning the means of production. I make and do everything in my studio in Bushwick. I have a place to perform. I have my photo studio. If I need it to be a gallery, it's a gallery. I don't ask nothing from no one. So yeah, try and cancel me. Cancel what? I own my shit.
Cancel it.
Uncancelable.
All right. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
No problem. Thank you for having me.